What is astrology? To most, mention of the word astrology often brings to mind popular horoscopes found in newspapers and magazines. Based on a particular month a person is born in, an individual can find his fortune and forecast based on his or her particular sign. Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, Aquarius, Pisces. These are the signs of the zodiac. But is astrology suggesting that personality types are limited to only 12 different types? Do we share our fate with the other 1/12 of the world population? Do we not control our own destiny? Many do not realize popular forms of astrology found in magazines and newspapers only represent a minor introduction to the ancient arts. In fact, it is debatable if popular media astrology is an accurate representation of astrology at all, as it is a contradiction to the ancient art that an accurate forecast can be deduced from the birth month alone. In the traditional art of astrology, an individual horoscope is based on the subject's unique time of birth, location of birth, and date of birth, giving them their individual horoscope detailing the various complexities of their personality.
Society is kind of, in the last few years, turned maybe more away from astrology and thinks it's more superstitious because the idea of free will is so strong in the collective, in modern day humanity, that the idea that anything like astrology or anything outside of yourself might have some influence upon you is rejected by the scientific mind that is so advanced in this communication of this day. The beauty and the value of astrology lies in the idea that we are connected to the infinite. We are connected to the cosmos. And as the planets move around the sun, as they orbit around the sun and come into mathematical relationships with each other, we can time periods in one's life when the dynamics, the psychological dynamics of those principles, of those planetary principles, come into play in your life.
If you go back as far back in human history as you possibly can, all the way back to primitive man and pre-literate societies, you will find evidence of a primitive astrology, and that the entire structure of society was organized around the movements of the sun and the moon.
They're perfect reflections of who they are. They're incredible. They're such incredible statements that just that alone would be enough to make most people say, wow, if they had the ability to interpret these charts. George Bush has a bundle chart. He has no aspects that want to go beyond his scope, so he's got a very small. Whether you're for or against him, it doesn't matter. You can be very happy that he has this very concentrated focal point where he doesn't have any peripheral vision. John Kerry has too much peripheral vision. They're just the opposite. And these are things that are so clearly shown in astrology, but we can never get this into the public arena because we have too many oppositions from people from science. 847 or 387, or I don't know how many scientists signed a statement back in 1983, I think it was, that astrology was bogus. These are people who don't even know what it means. So we have a very difficult time getting into showing the world what we can really do and what we're really all about. In the Middle Ages, you'd have the Vatican, you'd have the Medici family, you'd have families who spent all of their resources working with Michelangelo and Raphael and the painters and the great artists, and they supported them. And this was also true of astrologers, etc. Nowadays, we don't have any of these resources, and art is in the same limbo that astrology is, even though I wouldn't make any equivalence in terms of what it does, but artists, how many people make a living with art, and then how many people are artistically inclined? I mean, we have great difficulty in our society giving value and support to things that aren't a bottom line stuff.
It all began with man's fascination with nature and gazing at the starry sky. The closest archaeological evidence of systemized astrology began with the ancient Mesopotamians. In an effort to comply with nature, these early stargazers attempted to forecast the best time to plant crops, when to be prepared for natural disasters, and when to migrate. Astrology was universal as it traveled from culture to culture, all adding their unique influences to the art. Some of the civilizations included the East Indians, Egyptians, Arabians, Greek, Mayans, and Chinese. However, the astrology we have today in the West derives closely from the innovations of the Greeks. The Greeks implemented their mythological symbols in the zodiac as well as refining the use of precise mathematical calculations. Astrology also gained popularity with many of the great minds: William Shakespeare, Isaac Newton, Galileo, and Kepler.
But if you really go back, I mean, if you look at the Inca, the Aztec, the Mayan, the Chinese, early Indian civilizations, no matter where you go, American Indian civilization, you'll find these same kind of megalithic sites, and you'll find evidence of rudimentary form of a primitive astrology that became increasingly sophisticated century after century after century. So.
While astrology was highly respected in ancient times, it fell into a period of decline with the Age of Enlightenment. Science and religion became at odds with each other as it seemed one impeded the progress of another. Science challenged the Christian faith when it implied the earth revolved around the sun, contrary to the Church's vision that the sun revolves around the earth. Due to astrology's metaphysical nature, astrology was associated with religion and rejected by science. From astrology, the science of astronomy was developed. With the shift in society away from religious and spiritual ideas, astrology fell into the background of common knowledge and into the realms of a forgotten art.
I think that that we can predict events to any degree is remarkable and significant, obviously. The value of predicting events, of course, is open to question. I always say with traditional event-oriented predictive astrology that the most you can be is right. But whether or not being right necessarily is helpful to a client is highly questionable. Sometimes it may or may not be helpful. I think there are other occasions when it is enabling in some way, or it can hold the client back, or it reinforces their anxiety, or it keeps them dependent on the astrologer. It can actually impair the development of self-reliance and independence, which I think is a sort of part of what it means to be an ethical astrologer, is to support the client in becoming independent of the astrologer. If you allow yourself to be used by the client in a way that supports their neurosis and their anxiety about the future, so that you're always predicting what could happen or what might happen and advising them accordingly, I think it's a way of being enabling. And I think it can actually reinforce some of the fears and anxieties that bring the client to the astrologer, that are better. A better way of servicing the client, I think, is to help them take some responsibility for their fears and gain some insight into what's generating those fears, so that they're not so dependent on psychics and astrologers to predict the future.
Experimentation did not lend itself to astrological findings. We weren't able to apply a scientific method to astrology in any successful way in the centuries back, when we got into the scientific revolution. So people just discarded it without really proving that there was anything wrong with it or anything of that sort. We have the same difficulty with psychology and economics and other sociology and other sciences, but those difficulties are being handled in ways that nowadays astrology could probably do it too, but we've gotten so far out of sync with our world, with the world in itself, that people just refer to make fun of us and refer to us as people who believe in some ancient whatever that wasn't valid.